Hey everybody, you ready? Are we ready? Okay. All right. I'm going to start talking, so it's going to become harder to communicate. All right, here we go. So, welcome to how soil is the key to our climate restoration. I know that the flyer said the foundation, because it's both. It's the foundation and it's also the key. So, I want to get into this, but I don't want to blow them out of the water in there. Can you tell me, can you actually go in there and see if I'm too loud for them? They're all good? All right. Okay. Is it better like this? If I talk like this and we get all personal? Are you up for it? No, they're recording this. They might be recording this, so the quality might be important. It's all good. I was a school teacher, so I'm comfortable doing whatever. Yeah? Okay. All right. So here we go. So why soil? Well, there's these primary reasons why soil. And all of these things, we're going to circle back to this, but it's all the linchpin. Soil is the linchpin in our reality. So number one, we are soil. The term human has the same root as humus and the same root as humble. So we talk about like fertile soil, it's open to suggestion. You can put anything in it and it will grow. Good things will come from it, right? That is what we are when we're humble, right? We're just like that fertile soil that can grow anything, do anything, because we're open to what's possible. So we are soil beings. Essentially, that's what our name is. We are the dust-to-dust beings. So we also eat soil. I mean, the reality is the other part of photosynthesis happens to be the soil part, where all those sugars that are created in the photosynthetic reaction are then being traded and exchanged with the soil food web. And without the soil food web, you wouldn't be able to grow that plant. So the soil food web is essential to life. This is from one of my books. It's a lot of arrows. We make soil, as the last speaker brought up so eloquently. We make soil. And not only that, has anyone here joined Make Soil, the makesoil.org, where you have people drop off compostable materials at your house? Yeah. If you join makesoil.org, you can sign up and be on a database, and people will drop off their compostables because you know how to compost. Or if you're like, I just can't do that. I'm in my house 2 days a week, and then the rest of the time I am traveling or something, or taking care of your mother, then you can give your compost and feel like, oh, it's going to the right people. So, we make soil. Also, everything else makes soil. I mean, like, that's the function. We're all like here to replenish the actual foundation of reality. And then we turn into soil. So the carbon cycle, we all dust to dust, everything turns into soil that is carbonaceous. We'll come back to that actually. So it's the foundation for all life because we're all part of the carbon family. But who am I? Usually I start with an introduction. I'm Matt Powers, and today we're talking about soil. And I was a musician. I played with people like this. I met my wife, and I kind of like changed what I was focused on. And very shortly after we started our family, my wife got cancer, and again my focus shifted even more. I was a touring musician. I mean, if you look here, you guys probably recognize ZZ Top's guitarist, right? I met him an hour before. We jammed at South by Southwest that day, and it was all filmed and everything, and it's on the internet. But that right there is the house drummer for Saturday Night Live. I played with him for 7 years. He's like, was one of the top studio musicians in New York. That's all he ever wanted to do. It's all he ever wanted to be. But and I was a touring musician. And this is Rachel Ray's husband. So I was like, they would take me to the best restaurant, and then I would go on stage and play bass for an hour, and then I'd go to like a hotel. It was ridiculous. And I was totally like pampered and had this whole life and whatnot. They still have that life. I had to find them a replacement. They kept sending limos to find me in backwoods in the California, like far reaches, and they would come and find me and fly me back to New York to play. I kid you not, until I found someone to replace me. And the person's still in the band, I think 10 years later. All right, so when I met my wife, though, all that really kind of shifted, and because, I mean, I stopped drinking, I wasn't interested in, really hanging out very much with people that, things could go wrong as a young married man. And so I just lost really excitement touring. But I liked music, and so I kept doing it. But then when my wife got cancer, and I don't know if you know many young people who have lost their thyroids already, but when my wife lost her thyroid 12 years ago, it was not normal. There was only elderly folk in there, and they were like, "Honey, what are you doing in this part of the hospital? Come out here. It's dangerous." And because they're all radioactive. All those women sitting in the office are radioactive, and they're like, "Oh, you shouldn't be near me." But my wife took the radiation. You know about this too, right? They walk in a suit. All right, so what happens with radiation is that, especially with the isotope, the iodine isotope, is they walk in with a box, and they're in a suit. You're not in a suit. They open the box up. You're supposed to open the inner box once they leave the room, and then you take the pill inside. So this is what my wife had to do. And then 3 months later, she got melanoma, all over her legs, not where she's sunning. And so when I brought this up with the doctors, I'm like, could the radiation have caused this? They're looking at me blankly, wondering and their eyes are going all over the place. And I'm like, you don't know? And then they look embarrassed. And they have to leave the room. And they're like, oh, no, I can't. I got to go now. And then when I ask, well, when is it safe to have my son? Because he's a baby at this point, is my son here. And I get 3 months, 6 months, 4 months. And I'm like, what's true, guys? And the doctors didn't know. They were just reading off their individual playbooks. They didn't know. And then as I did more of the research, it became more and more concerning about how much they didn't know. We didn't know. I mean, our second child we had after my wife lost her thyroid. We didn't know if it was even possible to have children after that. So it was really traumatic. And I mean, I was there during 9/11. I was pretty traumatized by that. And then I was in New York. I was an NYU student. And then my wife, within 3 years later, I get married. My wife basically gets cancer within a year of us getting married. No, it was a year and a half. But it was this cold shock. And I was already kind of pulling away from that life that it was. He's an amazing musician, my son. When I was younger than him, all I wanted to be was a musician. And at his age, he's so good at music, and I was just still wishing I could be a musician at his age. And so it was my ultimate dream. And then to lose it, to lose that connection, that deep connection. You play the same song for 7 years, you kind of lose connection. And then for this to happen, I lost it. I became depressed. I became angry. I became kind of opposite what people know me for nowadays. And we moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. People thought it was crazy. I was making $350 an hour playing a 4-string bass. I mean, it's ridiculous. That almost shouldn't exist. And especially for a 20-something-year-old, it goes straight to the head. And so I left. This was amazingly painful to do because it was drowning my dream. And then I became the thing that I swore I would never, ever do. I became a public school teacher because I had to be home to help take care of the kids and to take care of my wife and do the meals and stuff. At this point, my wife kept getting, you're going to have to restart it. At this point, my wife kept getting cancer. She's had cancer, depending on how you count, if you group the cancer cases in different spots at the same time, between 6 and 8 times. So she's had lots of cancer. And we've done the Gerson therapy. We've done all sorts of like alternative treatments. But it became really clear on during my first national tour that I had to be home to be a good dad. I had to be home to be a good husband. And if I wanted my family to be healthy, to be emotionally stable, and for my wife to be a grandparent with me, that I needed to be home. And so I started subbing after a very good man and my wife like worked on me for several weeks. The guy got me a job basically instantly in the local school district. I was a sub in Fresno, and then I was a sub in Madera County, which is the 6th most violent county in America. I worked at the juvenile delinquent work farms. I totally fell in love with teaching. My mom was a teacher. She was the person who created the first special ed curriculum for middle schoolers in the state of New York, and it was adopted into law while she was still a student teacher. And so maybe epigenetically there's something there, I don't know. But as soon as I saw how poorly treated our kids were, it just tore me up inside. And I just knew that who I was an advocate for these kids. I had to find a path for these kids to travel so they could get out of this situation. I mean, graduating, they had 3 options. They could, go into the military, they could go to jail, or they could go into serious debt. To go into a career path that may not reward them. So I was a kooky teacher. I eventually started relating everything to the garden. Seed saving somehow became a part of English class. The other teachers were kind of like, how is this possible? I was really blessed with a principal that protected me for many years. Yeah, he was a great guy. I mean, we're in Madera, and he's signing his emails with Noam Chomsky quotes. Totally, amazing guy. So I got really into gardening. And I discovered permaculture in the middle of that because I couldn't figure out how to grow in my soils at temperature and deal with the animals and the gophers and everything. I was really overwhelmed. And then I figured it out. If you look right there, that's me. Everything around me is throw sown, like flying through the garden like this with seeds and just walking back later and just having it grow. Because seeds, if you train them properly, and soil, if you prepare it properly, literally will just run itself like a natural machine, like nature, actually. And so this is what I learned to do, and within only a few months, I was making soil that you could stick your arm into your shoulder, like that deep, 3 feet deep. I had generational farmers show up. I had PBS show up, start filming. This is growing in 140 degrees. 2 inches deep. So ambient temps are always going to be lower. So it's 112 out, but the soil here is 140. And so it was green and never even watered. And so I kept doing these things, and I started writing a book. And I Kickstarted it because I was demonstrating how to do a Kickstarter for my students, because I was trying to show them how they could be entrepreneurs and do startups and get out of their situation. And I ended up getting myself out of that situation. And my books went all over the world, multiple translations, in 6 different languages. In the past 5 years, I've released 16 books on permaculture, and I think 8 or 9 online courses, depending on how you count. And I work with peer reviewers and experts all over the world, especially the ones that sometimes contradict each other, because, oh boy, there's reasons why. Not one of them's a liar. One of them is thinking this because of that, and the other's thinking this because of that. And in between those 2 things, there's an overlap of interest for me. So I really like talking to almost everyone. Years ago, my brother was the go-between between the math department and the archaeological department at the Museum of Natural History in New York. And when I heard that they needed go-betweens, I found it really fascinating. And now that I am a go-between, it is the funnest thing ever. I was able to be a go-between, a serious filter between Peter McCoy and Dr. Elaine Ingham, and it was so fascinating. because they would be like, no, that's not possible. And then I'd say it to the other person, like, well, how is that possible? And then they're like, well, I read it here. And then they're like trading the journals and the research. It's awesome. And then they're like, well, how do they actually do that? And then they talk about the actual field test. Yeah. So anyway, nerding out. So, oh yeah, this is an impossible purple speckled Peruvian corn. I bred this. Well, I combined 2 land races and bred this with painted mountain corn. But this is the original, and this is the first adaptation to North America. So it was considered impossible, but I didn't know it at the time. I only found out when I was at Baker Creek, like, presenting it live. And I'm like, and then Steven's like, Matt, you know that this corn's not supposed to be grown in America, like, according to the universities. I'm like, what do you mean not supposed to? He's like, it's daylight sensitive. You know, you can't do it. And I'm like, mine did. So anyway, I did a trick, basically. I grew it on the shady side of a hill underneath an oak tree. We all could do that. Just that simple. Just so that it doesn't, I mean, what I figured out was basically that when we talk about photoperiodic, we're actually talking about joules, not hours. We're talking about actual energy. So I was able to grow like my best food, winter crop-wise, in summer underneath a canopy of 3 different plant layers, because it wasn't the heat, it was the diffuse light that mimicked the winter. Anyway, so speaking of, this is that area, right? So this is some of the things that I discovered that we can, in terms of soil, in terms of gardening, that just with like 3 to 6 inches of mulch, we can lower the temperatures 50 to 60 degrees. And that's that area in the fall. So it's starting to re-sprout. But you can see right there, that's the soil. It is dust. It's almost white in spots. All right, and then I created this advanced permaculture student online course 2 years ago. That is actually restarting up right now in October. That's with over 70 experts. It's actually, I think it might be the first accredited permaculture course in Canada. It's accredited in provincially in British Columbia for high school, well, for triple credit for high school students. So science electives, this could be what is happening more and more. We just got to break into it in America more. So many schools are allergic to science. So right now, it's not this next Monday. That's wrong. It's today. This is a slide from my presentation last week. So today I launched this Kickstarter, Permaculture Soil Science and Solutions, to talk about the simple, elegant actions that are micro to macro that step into the complexity. And it's all really, for me, about bridging into the regenerative economy. Because without the academic bridge, we'll never form the permanent culture that we talk about in permaculture. Because the reality is, schooling and education, our entire system of inoculating the next generation, leads to a job, leads to a behavior system and pattern that reinforces that reality and that system. And if we want to have a different culture and in a different system, we have to teach kids differently. And because it won't, and when we have to have the colleges also, it has to be K through 12 collegiate career training. And so that's what I've been really working on. That's what all that stuff was. So that's a missed slide. Oh, well, it should say balances our climate. Well, it does balance our climate. So going back to this slide from the beginning, when we look at this, we tend to see photosynthesis, right, as the way that we're drawing down the carbon, and then we tend to get focused on the fact that all these different releases of CO2 are happening. But something that I've noticed in my studies that is the linchpin in all of this is the soil, because in both spots, the soil sequestration, even fossilized carbon, all these things are trying, even the sediment of the ocean, because there's 4 major soils to the ocean. And let us not forget that, because that is an important aspect to something later on that we will learn. But it's really critical to understand that the soil is the area where it's all headed. It's the area where it's all stored. So we may focus on releasing, we may focus on the pathways of bringing things down, but as you've seen, have you guys seen that NASA video, that simulation of CO2, a year of CO2? The plants take it all up every summer. There's no excess CO2 really in the atmosphere when the plants take it, but they get desiccated and release it all. So it doesn't go all back into the soil because it gets desiccated. So when plants do grow, they're doing two things at once. They're growing themselves and they're also growing the soil. So when we look at this, it's really critical to think about that. Because corn, just corn, because corn's a C4 grass, right? It's taking carbon in a uniquely different way compared to all other plants that are not C4 grasses. They take carbon in a broader bandwidth. And so if we look at this, the net primary productivity of field corn per hectare is 400 times more than the annual increase in the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide in that area. So in other words, we're actually working with plants that are able to take in enormous amounts of carbon, but it's how we treat the soil, it's how we treat the plants, and how we treat our waste, really, like the last talk. That is the real issue. So we have these magnificent plants. We have these magnificent pathways. Let's see another one. This actually goes through the numbers. But this is 2005. Keep that in mind. But still, we're talking about millimeters of carbon. And so this is used to, when you measure carbon, you're burning the organic matter, bringing it down to soot, essentially. So in the arable land, in this quote, this is from Priority 1, P.A. Yeoman's son wrote this. We're talking about 2.1 millimeters thick that we would need to cover the farmland. So it's not much if we start working. And it gets even better. So just, I know we seem daunted. It's got to work, but we'll see. So this is the other thing. How's it looking, James? I filled it up? That's crazy. All right, well, now it'll get really good, I guess. So 47% of the temperate zone is actually carbon that's been taken down and stored and sequestered by arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. That is one form of fungi is responsible for globally, we estimate, because remember, everything global is an estimate. We got to remember that. Is 1/3 of the planet's carbon. One fungi, 1/3 of the planet. So we have these powerhouses already present, and we just stop using fungicides. We stop tilling, and we can do some harrowing with the 1.5 tillage. You know, you don't need to destroy the 6 to 8 inches where the mycelium is, and the concentration of all the nutrients are, and life is. So we don't need to ban everything annual-wise, because you need the contact with the soil to do the annuals. The perennials and the trees, I mean, we can really do the no-till there, but you do have to till a little bit. You have to disturb it so that you actually are touching the soil for those other plants, for the annuals. So we got to preserve that fungi. And then the beautiful thing about all of this is carbon is just organic matter, right? Remember, we're all part of the carbon family. It's just organic matter. So it's everything we deal in. It's all of our waste. It's all of our human manure. It's all the plants. It's all the fungi. It's all the paper, all the cardboard. Now, let's look a little bit at our past record with soil, because I don't know if David's going to tomorrow go over all the details of our past with soil, but David Montgomery, if you do see a talk tomorrow, please go see David. He has, I'm a history teacher, a credentialed California history teacher, an English teacher. I'm dual credentialed. He rewrote history for me. And I see nods. It's true. It's wild when you hear the words of George Washington condemning U.S. farmers for, if you can call them cultivators. And I'm paraphrasing, but he's literally saying, you can't call them that because they're not doing a good job. They're destroying the soil. So most of us know about the biocides, but there's a deeper history here. and they disrupt the soil food web. Chemical fertilizers are primarily salts. And remember salting the earth? The Romans came and salted the earth. What are they doing? It's actually gypsum. They were destroying the soil so their enemies could no longer grow there. That's so rude. All right. So the salts, they desiccate organic matter. They make it soluble. They allow that cut organic matter then to be slurped up by the plant. And then it's gone. Or it's washed away as well and leached out. This kills the soil life, washes away the soil. But this is what's even worse about this. There is no choice in the matter here. These plants are being force-fed. There's no consent. What is going on here is we are literally violating the choice of plants because plants choose for themselves. They have an economy below the soil. They literally put out messages using exudates, which is primarily made out of the carbon sugars that they are creating with photosynthesis. They don't have much else to work with, but they're bringing that out, and they do some proteins and some carbohydrates and whatnot, but it's mostly sugars, and they're putting out different things on every single different root hair. And so you're talking about everything is actually calling out for a different population of fungi and bacteria, and then those fungi and bacteria, they're going to attract different protozoa. Protozoa is going to consume them and then release their nutrients, and then those nutrients are the manure of protozoa happens to be bioavailable to the plant. And so it all is manure based, right? But the plant was playing chess 3 steps ahead. We can't be like the sophisticated doctor to every plant, but the plant can itself. If we respect plants, if we respect soil, we respect life, it will teach us what it can do. And what I've seen, and maybe I've hinted at it enough in here, is that consistently I do things that aren't possible to other people because I'm just not assuming that nature can't do that. Right? I mean, I'm just assuming that, nature can do amazing things. I'm waiting to watch. And that's what really is. That's why I feel like permaculture, the reason we talk about observation so much is because that's where the real change happens, is learning from nature. Not just picking techniques up and then observing the techniques, hopefully, but learning from wild systems, learning from nature, doing things that we're not doing. And then tillage. We've mentioned this before, but do you guys know that tillage does this? So the fungal dominance, the fungal abundance, depending on how you say it, right? That's the woods. We're going to go hunt the mushrooms in the woods, right? We're not going to the beach, though there are some fungi over there, no doubt. But the tillage is cutting up the roots of the mushrooms. They're cutting up the mycelium, the actual internet, the communication, the highway for the soil economy. They're cutting it up. And so they're sending it back to where it's weedy. And by the way, if you want a copy of this, that'll be at the end. It'll be my gift to you. So let's go back, though. So these are the things that tillage does. Erosion. We know this, right? This is why George Washington was like, we must start doing contour plowing. Sounds like keyline, doesn't it? George Washington. Pretty interesting. Number 2, nutrient loss. When we're oxidizing the soil, when we're tilling it up, when we're mincing it up, we're actually we're releasing those nutrients, and the plants may slurp some of them up, but most of them are being leached, and then they're out of the reserves. You broke the bank in order to access it for your plants. But if the plants are partnering with the life, then they judiciously can choose, can barter, can partner with the soil food web, partner with the endo and ectomycorrhizal fungi, and get what they need. Very few plants partner with both, though. I should say that. And then soil structure loss, right? Things collapse. There's no air. There's no oxygen. And then you get anaerobic spots mentioned before, where pathogens, diseases, and all those other things start happening. And then pH change. That's more weeds, because they're just trying to heal the area that was disturbed. And pH and nitrogen cycle and all those things are linked to that. And then to get, it's right down to it, it actually, tillage causes the collapse of civilizations. And it has over and over and over. And that's why I mentioned David Montgomery. You know what I'm talking about. David Montgomery is the one who brought up the fact that this has been happening over and over and over again for 10,000 years at least that we know of. We have been living this cycle. And so Thomas Jefferson and George Washington agreed on this, which, they often didn't agree. And then Aristotle and Plato even were referencing this. You go back and they're talking about how they remove the trees and how the forest soils are gone and how they're tilling it all away. We've been desertifying the planet for at least 10,000 years. And we've got examples of regenerative ag that are 35,000 years old in the Australian Aboriginals' history and archaeological record. But really what happened, because they did their giant animals, the megafauna, didn't. They disappeared earlier when humans and dogs arrived and hunted in packs because they didn't have any pack hunting animals in Australia, or at least this is how the theory goes. But in the rest of the world, Australia is fascinating because it's very unique in many ways. The Ice Age never reached it in the way that it reached other places. It dried it out instead of glaciating. So they didn't have the glaciating tillage happen. So it's a very eroded landscape. But we had this up until 10 to 12,000 years ago powering the annual to perennial cycle. This thing, right? They're knocking the trees over. The disturbance is allowing the weeds and the annuals to come. And who's following them around and painting pictures of them? Us. Right? We're following these animals around, eating the annuals that pop up after them. And then when they died off, we had to figure out a way to continue this cycle. How to restart the cycle. And so what did we arrive upon? We arrived upon tillage, and we arrived upon burning. And those are the ways that we replace this animal. And that's really like our challenge as humans, is that we have to grapple with the world as it is and the challenges that are real. And this is one of the real challenges that has been implicit in our history, and we've not acknowledged it. And then many people are like, oh, well, we hunted them and we killed them. Well, it was also warming, so they probably were weakened. And as we know from our gardening early days, right, what happens to that plant that says it's weak? The bugs come and take care of it, right? And maybe we were the bugs in that instance. We were the mechanism that took it out. But the brilliant news is this. So before you leave, I'll give you this information. We can do this in 9 years. Do you see this? This is Lewis Plateau, and many of you have seen this picture, but I'll tell you something else about it. So this process took under 10 years, and what happened is it started off as 35,000 square kilometers, and they had a small budget, and basically what happened is as they started doing it, everyone was like, hey, can you do that in my province now? And it kept going more and more viral, and it ended up covering 500,000 square kilometers. 35,000 square kilometers is the size of Belgium. So we're talking about countries of space was regenerated in under 10 years. And the crazy thing about this is we paid for this. Do you guys know this? Okay, so our government has so much amnesia, and so like, this department won't talk to that one, that we paid for this along with China and the World Bank. And everyone's like, wait, the World Bank? Matt! I'm serious. So they know how to do this stuff. This stuff is not controversial. So don't let people like, browbeat you on social media or in local politics or on the news and the fake media. We know how to regenerate our planet. And this, you can find it on Google, and then you can run the numbers because it's public. So you can run the numbers and see that, hey, it only costs $14 per hectare to regenerate this entire area that was basically desert. 10,000 years of degradation. So the Middle East, so the Sahara Desert, all these places that are actually desertified because of human actions, we can flip again. We can bring back these areas. So let's bring it back to some of these benefits. So we're bringing back the soil. We're bringing back all this stuff. Well, what is it in for the individual, right? That's great for the scenery, Matt. But the reality is it's actually the center of everything. Our communities, our clothing, our food, our power, our energy, all of it can relate regeneratively to soil. It can be the heartbeat and the cycle of our communities and a soil-to-soil system of solutions. Am I running late? All right, you got to get on stage. You look amazing. Well, I've got only a couple slides left, so let's do it. All right, because the reality is the soil microbiology is cousin to the gut microbiology. We are the soil. It's that relationship that is what keeps us healthy. So a healthy soil is our healthy bodies, and the healthy plants are in between. So soil and climate. Now, let's go back to the ocean. 1 minute. All right, here we go. Do you guys know about this? Marine permaculture. It's featured in 2040, which is top 10 in the box offices in Australia. It's about how in 2040 we're going to have a completely amazing regenerative earth. And it's top 10. And it's going to come to America and it's going to hit top 10 again. Because everyone wants a better life. Everyone wants a better tomorrow. And this restores the upwelling in the ocean, which undoes the acidification. Because as soon as organic matter or carbon goes past the 1,000-meter marker in the oceans, it's gone for thousands of years. And the last ice age was started this exact way. A zola formed a freshwater lens and filled up an entire area. Then the lens broke, and the azola died and dropped because the salty water dropped below the 1,000-meter, and it started the process of an ice age. We can sink the carbon. The largest soil bank on the planet is under the ocean. And it's just waiting for us to start participating with it again. And by the way, Led Zeppelin fans, mountains flow into the sea, right? That's where all the nutrients went. So we just got to get that kelp from there back onto land to fix the fertility. And then after, because I mean, you guys know that this is 5 to 7 years and we reverse all the carbon, right? You guys know that, right? Okay, kelp grows at 0.5 meter a day. Kelp grows at an order of magnitude higher than any plant on the land. So we can take all the carbon back in with kelp. And then at the end of this 5 to 7 years, so we don't start an ice age, we then end world hunger, we end infertility of the soil, and we end malnutrition. So we do that. 10 times the sequestration, it's 10 times faster than anything on land, and all the missing minerals and incredible benefits that we'll get into another time. So if you want to learn more about this, check out my Kickstarter. For the book, for the courses, I'm Matt Powers. Let's make soil the primary linchpin in our future of solutions and regeneration. I'm Matt Powers.